Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Film Family and Happy New Year. Thank you guys for tuning in. Today, we're going to be talking about the new film from Sam Mendes, 1917.
Yeah, so the one shot World War I movie, and it's been getting a lot of hype, a lot of buzz for Oscars, and also just people in general saying it's the best. I saw one that said it's the best war film since Saving Private Ryan. So clearly people like this movie. It's got a lot of acclaim, and I think that I'm not just saying this lightly. This is one of the most technically impressive films I've ever watched.
Easily.
It's Roger Deakins doing the cinematography, largely considered one of the greatest, if not the greatest, DPs ever, and I'd probably say he's the greatest. And it seems like on this movie he's just trying to flex his cinematic muscles by being like, oh yeah, I'll just do that. And obviously a lot of people are going to compare it to Birdman because Birdman had the same type of camera movement. I don't know if this is Roger Deakins trying to say like, hey, Luz Besky, like I'm as good as you, like you can't talk, or this is just him trying to, do something new. Whatever it is, it's a really impressive movie. Like seriously, there's some times in this movie where you're just gonna ask yourself like, how is this happening right now from a technical standpoint?
Yeah, I agree. Most of this movie is like one long cut, and the cuts that they do have are far and few between. And that's hard to do just as a technical shot, moving a camera, going through sets and making sure there's no lights or sound equipment in the back. But the scale on which they do this movie at, and you have the trenches, you have the soldiers, you have the triage, you have even they do circular patterns, which are not easy because the crew has to move in a circular pattern. And it's so complex, and you can see it on screen. I don't even know if like you're thinking about it as a movie. You're just like, how did they film this?
I think that even if you're a casual film watcher, you're gonna be like, well, this is like
it's difficult to do.
Because sometimes when you're watching a tracking shot, say for instance an action scene, if you're like a casual film goer, you might not be paying attention to cuts. You might just be watching and saying, "Oh, this is fun," and the fluidity is kind of ingrained into your head because that's what the camera's doing. But you're not really thinking of that like explicitly. But with this movie, there are certain shots. Like there's a shot where they're moving with these characters, and they go this way, and then they turn backwards, and then they move to the right. And I literally was like,
no, they did that like 2 or 3 times because of the trench. It would open up and the
like
camera would move
the
around
and then talk, but then they would like circle it around. And I don't know if it was like what was going on with the crane or dolly or whatever, but I was genuinely like floored with some of the things they did. I was asking myself like, how do they do this? Because I need to see the behind the scenes.
That's funny that you say that because that's when I was watching this movie. I'm like, I can't wait for the behind the scenes.
Yes,
this is
you can look it up on. They have some shots on YouTube on like how they rebuilt everything.
Really,
Monkey already watched some of it. It's crazy.
I mean, it's just technically amazing. And you're right, Roger Deakins. It's like it did feel like he was just kind of like, this is what I learned throughout my whole career, and let me just show you the master at work. Because it had everything. It's like almost a checklist of hard scenes to do, and let me just check them all off. Like, here you go.
Well, something too is like a movie that I actually compare this to, maybe a little more than Birdman, is The Revenant, because The Revenant, when they speak to each other, the characters, they don't ever like stop them and get like a face shot or profile shot, or they never really get it at eye level. And none of the dialogue in this movie is ever really at eye level. Like there's a couple times that the camera eventually moves into the character speaking. There's only like a very few select examples I can think of, but I think that that's pretty difficult for the actors as well, because when you're an actor, you're watching the camera. Maybe you're not, depends on how you're acting, but you have to at least be aware of where the camera is placed. And for an actor trying to say their dialogue while also doing the blocking of the scene, when that scene's blocking could take like potentially upwards of like 10 minutes, plus say their lines, but also like make sure their body's in the right place. That is difficult. And for the camera to get these shots that aren't necessarily eye level and aren't maybe like something that would be taught at film school because it's too difficult probably, for that camera to just be doing that for a whole movie, like that is so difficult. And the way they do it, it's just so impressive. Like there's a shot in this movie, because I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but where a character moves in the room and sees like a new character, and the way they move the camera so quickly to establish that and then move back into the dialogue, I was like,
Underground, you're talking about darkly lit?
Yeah.
I think I know the scene you're talking about.
Yeah. And the way like it did that, I was like, I really wish I was there to just see them move that camera. Because this movie, and not doing any discredit to Sam Mendes, because he did a great job in this movie, but this is really Roger Deakins' movie. And it seems like in a way he's almost half co-directing this movie, because the movie is so dependent on what it does with its camera that if that failed, the movie would fail, because I'm not going to call call it a gimmick for this movie because that's kind of a disrespectful word. There are movies that are going to probably be doing this now because of this movie, and it's going to be gimmicky and it's going to be bad. But in this movie, that is the biggest thing about it that you're paying attention to as the audience member. And if that fails, the movie fails. And it never once failed to impress me on so many levels.
I also think, though, that they decided to use these long tracking shots as an artistic way to tell the story. Because what I think is interesting is, A, there's not a lot of movies about World War I. Most people focus on World War II.
Definitely.
B, most war movies are action-orientated, whereas this one wasn't. Even the objective is not go in and shoot them up. It's trying to just deliver a message. So what I really think they were trying to focus on with this is the actual image of war and like being in it, because they focused on stuff that's very gross, like the presence of rats. They did the thing where his hand goes into the body, you know what I mean? And if you look even in the backgrounds, there are dead bodies, there are skulls that are half eaten in the thing. And I think they chose it to show you that there are no breaks in war, you know? And each scene is so long and it drags everything out of you. It's like you never get a break.
They had to coordinate where each like body would go for the actors. The actors would need to touch those bodies. The cameras would need to be balanced on that. So that just goes back to the technical impressiveness that this movie has. But thinking of that, something that I really appreciate in this movie is some of the tension that's constantly, because a lot of movies, even like a war, because the only war movie I can really compare this to is Dunkirk, where in terms of not having big action scenes, but showing the tension and thrill of war. But something this movie does is the tension never feels like it stops. The sound design isn't always like, ramping up to a climax, and there sometimes isn't even sound, but I always felt tense because, not just because like, oh, somebody might get sniped or something. I just was watching it feeling unsettled, and I was like, if I was one of those guys, I would hate to do this. And that was something that this movie does so well with its direction and its camera angles. And by the time, you get to some of the actual action in this movie, you're probably thinking to yourself just like, I would hate to be this guy in this scenario. Yeah. And it's just it's so blood curdling, and it's so like just kind of frenetic and hyper sometimes, and then sometimes it's dead silent and just you're afraid for what's gonna happen. It's very well done.
Yeah, definitely very well done. You do feel like you went on this journey with the the peoples, and it just like for me, I feel like that was what's so unique and special about it because of the hidden cuts and all that, and almost the one shot kind of thing. You do feel like you're in real time in that way, and I think it was brilliantly done. I do give Sam Mendes credit because all the blocking and stuff, that's what the director does in terms of move like the act where you're supposed to be here when you deliver and all that stuff. The actors were great too. I don't know any of their names, but
I think they did a very good job actually.
Yeah, because that's hard to do too. You're watching people for that long period of time, and if they aren't believable or if they can't sell you on something, then you're going to lose interest on it. And I never lost interest in that journey.
I agree. What do you guys think about the color palette?
Well, that's something I was going to inquire, because I wonder how the color grading for this movie goes. Because when you're color grading, you take the image or the shot, and you look around the shot. But if your shot is like 10 minutes, how does one grade? Like, is it by frame?
Well, see, what I kind of thought is it really, they definitely say, I think it's historically accurate. I don't know much about World War I, but their outfits were very well thought out. Yeah. And I feel like a lot of the color grade was almost based around that outfits, because even when you're going to war, your outfit is based on the color of your surrounding, or your uniform is. And so I saw a lot of grays and browns and
muted
dirt,
colors,
you know what I mean? Yeah. But also the blue I felt was so contrast with the sky. And when you're talking about the tension, I feel like the movie's either very claustrophobic because you're in the trenches, or you're completely exposed in the open flatlands.
And you can be sniped.
Exactly. And you don't know what's going on, if there's bombs coming or anything like that.
I think a lot of great movies, at least great visual movies, have a color that really stands out the most, like that cinematographer nails. And I think for me, in this movie, it's green. I know a lot of people might say like brown because there's so much of it.
Why the green?
I think whenever there's green in this movie, it just looks so great when contrasted to some of the, like you said, muted ones with some of the dirt and like even the beige of the same. Okay. With the beige and the trenches.
Yeah.
And there's one shot in this movie. It's one of the best movie shots of this decade. Like seriously, and then this music kicks in, and I don't want to spoil where it is in the movie.
But it's the running scene?
Yeah. Okay. You spoiled it.
That's not, nobody knows where it is, and it's just the scene that it's running.
Anyway, when they put it into the movie, and then this like the music starts ramping up, and the way they did it, I don't want to start clapping right there.
Yeah.
But, you know, I was watching the movie, but I was so impressed with the way that scene, because that's a long take. There's stuff before that anyway, and then they get into that, and then there's stuff after that, and I was like, I don't know how this is.
I got to
done.
see the behind the scenes.
I really liked the musical score for this. Actually, I thought that they used
Yeah.
strings very nicely, and they used silence when it was appropriate, and it was just. I really it was well put together.
Yeah, Thomas Newman did the score. He did a really good job. And
Very good job.
Like I said, that part when the music kicks in, the camera's just pushing back, and you just see all this. Oh, it was an excellent shot.
It was, you know, I was just thinking back on it. Just it was a well done movie because, like, you think about, there's not one weak link in terms of even when the people run up on other people, you know, and it's like one bad actor or actress, and it's like. You're out of the movie.
Yeah.
And I never felt that. I felt like even
The only
different
problem
platoons.
I actually have with this movie was I felt that it was for editing purposes, but I felt like sometimes when they would do an action scene, like the character would jump, they would have him in the sky so they could cut. And it kind of gave it a CGI weird look to it to make a transition. And maybe it just came across weird, but I felt like that's what they used to end a scene for technical
interesting.
reasons
Okay.
to start the next one.
Yeah, I thought
But
that
was my only
action
issue.
definitely isn't your traditional war movie action either.
No.
It's a lot more like, you know, individualized, but
Yeah.
it still was just engaging to watch. And there's one sequence too where there's like this sniper, and I was like, you know, I was feeling intense during that. And I thought that was pretty much every sequence in this movie is well put together. I think there's something about this movie, and I feel like I'm doing a bad job at reviewing because I can't explain it. But there's one thing that I felt like was sort of missing. Maybe it didn't have maybe the emotional impact I was looking for. But there's one thing for this movie that makes me think like it's not perfect, you know.
Okay.
And I think, like I said, from a technical level, this is one of the most impressive movies maybe I've ever seen. Seriously, but I think there was one thing that this movie one little thing that seemed to be missing. But
Do you think it's the patriotism? Because
I mean,
that's present in almost all great war movies. Because
I don't
it makes
think
America
I don't think
great.
it's present. First of all, it's not an American.
I know,
movie,
that's
but
what I'm saying.
I don't think
Maybe
it's
lacking.
it's present in all great war movies, because in all the
Name
best
one that
war
it is.
movies, Platoon or Apocalypse Now, where they pretty much vilify America in some way. Yeah, but like I think
That was
like,
fast.
like
Pretty
when
quick, we're
when we reviewed Midway, we talked about how like annoying it was that the patriotism was so blatant. You know, it was like, oh, you know, country. And I'm not saying I need that in a war movie. It just felt like one thing was missing. And I know that's not a fair criticism because I can't explain it. That's just something that I watched the movie and I didn't think it was like perfect. So, you know, I'm going to rate this.
You go for it. I would just agree to that because I feel that something would be missing too. For me, it would be like it didn't really glorify going to war and it didn't really make them heroes or anything like that.
You wanted that?
No, that's almost what you expect from a war movie. At least for me, like when you
Okay.
talk about Fury or Saving Private Ryan, you know, there's a bigger purpose to something. I don't know how to explain it really, but this one is more about the harsh reality of war, and I don't think it's really glorifying it.
Speaking
in any
of
way.
Saving Private Ryan, and also Dunkirk,
I felt like it was very
think
similar to Saving Private
I
Ryan. The
actually
story
dunked it.
was.
The story was.
You
yeah.
know, because if
But
you think about
in terms of
Taj
the
Jackson,
muted
same.
colors, it actually shared a lot of visual kind of consistency with Saving Private Ryan with some of the muted colors, especially with green again and brown and some of the grays. But yeah, I'm gonna give this movie a 9 out of 10. I know that, you know, I didn't really criticize it, but there's one thing I felt was missing. But seriously, I was so impressed with this movie. This movie deserves at the least a cinematography nomination, and that's without saying it should win. That was one thing, is when I watch something shot by Roger Deakins, I'm always like, oh, where's those great shots I love? And this movie didn't really have the ability to make a beautiful shot because the camera was never really stopped. And if it did stop, it's on a still image of somebody hiding. You know, it's not going to make this beautiful, bombastic image. It just has to be kind of, again, somebody sitting there or focusing on whatever. So it wasn't like my favorite Roger Deakins movie in terms of just how it looked, but I think from a perspective of the technical achievement, this movie it's going to be one of those things that's taught in film school. It should
Easily.
be at least.
It should be.
Yeah.
For me, I would give it a 9.5 because my only actual problem with it was those weird transitions, and if it turned into like CGI actual thing. I don't know if they blurred the frames or what it was, but it
Just
it
intense
looked a little
moments in
weird
this
to me.
movie.
Yeah. That's all I guess. I liked it.
I would give it a 9.5 as well, just because it wasn't a perfect movie, but I'm having problems figuring out what that is.
Yeah.
That it wasn't like, okay, why can't I give it a 10? But I really heavily enjoyed this movie as someone that appreciates directing and cinematography. It's just and the craft, it just was like a master class in it.
Yeah.
It really was.
It's been I was telling Taj this yesterday. It's been a great year for cinematography because we've gotten such a vast array of different types of cinematography from different movies. So whatever takes home the gold this year, I think if it's not well deserved, that would be bad. But I think like whatever their 5 nominations are going to be, like they're going to be all very heavily competing with each other because it's such a great year for cinematography.
Yeah, just for me, in my last movie, I liked this movie on a technical aspect. I liked it on a creative aspect. I liked the storytelling of it, the acting. There's not one area that you can say had any issues because even the editing was done fantastically, you know. And I think it was everything.
Not too much of that.
And there isn't, but but it had to be because you can't film for that long. You have to cut it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I
want to see how they color graded this movie too,
it'd be
because
very
that sort of confused me. But yeah, so if you saw this movie, let us know what you thought. Where's it rank with your other favorite war movies? And like and subscribe, and we will see you next time.